The UN is begging Jerome to quit hiking rates. It's getting real out there, everybody. We talked about a potential dollar top last week. We'll talk about gold's strength this week. We'll talk about OPEC cuts. We'll talk about Hunter. Hunter might be getting grounded soon. We'll talk about the Trumpster. He might be getting his Twitter account back soon. We're going to talk about Elon. We're going to talk about the Ukraine. We're, of course, going to get into all things funny and offensive. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with Mr. Nick Hodge. This is therapy session number 189, otherwise known as Bizarro World. Nick, how goes it, sir? How are you? I didn't ask you how you were last week. I felt bad afterwards. I just had assumed that you were doing pretty well. But how are you this week?
I'm doing good. I'm in a new office. Sorry for the barren walls. I'll get some stuff up there eventually. At least they're freshly painted. I'm doing good. The markets are the markets. They continue to be bearish. I don't think the UN is going to change Jerome's mind.
The UN is begging the Federal Reserve Chair to quit hiking rates. What is going on in 2022, Nick?
A lot of noise out there, but I'm sure we'll get into it. Q3 numbers are about to come out, and you just had 3 down quarters of the S&P in a row, and I think that's going to continue. So other than being bearish and pessimistic, I'm doing good. How are you, Gerardo?
I'm doing well. Look, I think by the time people watch this or read this, I think Patriot Battery Metals have their financing closed. I know there's a ton of assays in the lab that they asked to hold off on while the financing closed to avoid a conflict of interest. I'm excited as all heck to see what those numbers look like. And I think whatever cap there was on the share price, and I mentioned this last week, I told you should have been in the market taking advantage of that weakness. I think given the close today on Thursday the 6th, it looks like that financing will be closed soon. And the weakness in the stock, I mean, we're talking slight weakness, right? It's 15% off its all-time highs, but I think that is done. So I'm excited there. There's bull markets and stuff, right? We've talked lithium, uranium is a bit stagnant, but I think that's coming. I had a great conversation earlier this week with UEC CEO Amir Adnani, who is as bullish as I've ever heard him, and I've known him for quite some time now, as have you. And so, no, look, I think there's a lot of opportunities out there, and excited to get to it. Let's get right into the markets. Let's talk gold. We talked last week about gold needing to close right around or above that 1684 mark on a monthly level to kind of reestablish some support. It failed to do so, but it started the month off pretty strong on the back of a weaker dollar, right? That index went from 115 to 111-ish the last time that I looked this week. And so correlation there, rates are doing what rates are doing. I know that's a lot in one question, but how do you see the strength, the recent strength in gold? And do you think it's a head fake?
It's complex. I told you, we always said last week, by the time you heard last week's podcast, it would have been the close of the month. Like you say, gold prices didn't make it back to that support level in the 1680s, but they did after, exactly like you say, on the back of a dollar weakness. But I think it's a short-term fluctuation. So, you got to be able to have a couple of thoughts in your head at the same time. One, that gold can be weak in the short term, but still be in a long-term bull market. The only reason gold went up, and I mean lump copper and with that as well, is that the dollar pulled back and rates went down a little bit. But that's temporary. You're already seeing rates starting to go back up, certainly in the UK, despite what the Bank of England did. And I think you get a reprisal of the bull market in dollars in the US as well. And so I think it's a short-term thing, a short-term bump for gold. Everybody came out of the woodwork last week, all the bugs came out from under the rock to tell you that silver was at 20 and going to 30. And, it was the best week for gold in something like 3 months, I think. But a short-term blip, I think, in the overall trend that we're in, which is not necessarily down for gold, but certainly not a short-term bull market.
Well said. I couldn't agree with you more. It would not surprise me to see the dollar absolutely rip here in the next several weeks and coming months. And then I think by year end, we have a situation that looks very different than the situation we're in now. But it's only October, y'all. And I told you last week, October has a track record of being host to a lot of very important instruments in the financial space breaking, right? So when we talk bond markets, when we talk stock markets, I've been watching credit default swaps all week, Credit Suisse credit default swaps. The premium on those, Nick, I don't know if you saw it. It looks like a Viagra chart. It's straight that way. So
at least something's going up.
Something's going up. People are getting nervous, right? People are getting nervous out there. And so anytime I see those premium spreads widen the way that they've widened there, it tells me something's not right under the hood. And I know that, Bank of England and, Bank of Japan and they've all done quick pivots and reversals. But again, we have to look at the market as a whole. And it doesn't just depend on, two governments or two central banks deciding to pivot. It's going to take a little more than that. So, and there's countries that are hiking rates. Mexico just hiked, a month or so ago, or a couple of weeks ago. I'm sorry. Bank of Canada, is busy. And so, no, yeah, it's a long-winded way of saying spot on with your analysis. Very complex times. It takes a lot to kind of keep track of all of it. And hopefully this can provide a little bit of guidance on what you should be watching, right? Watch the bond markets, watch those yield spreads. And then look, again, there's bull markets out there. You just have to find them and make sure that you're allocating capital towards those companies that are bullish internally, bullish on the macro side of it, and cashed up, because this isn't the time that you want to go to the market, right?
Yeah. I mean, interesting times. We say that all the time. Not a lot to do if you're a long-term minded investor or speculator. I mean, I haven't been making a ton of moves. We talked about the cash position. At the end of every week, I go and I look at my account history and see what I actually bought and sold throughout the week, right? And some weeks are much busier than others, but I haven't bought and sold a lot recently. The only thing I've done really is short the NASDAQ. We had a couple of up days, and I took the liberty to short the NASDAQ. And then the other thing I'd say is if you are willing to trade, on a week to week or 2 week to basis, then you can do that as well. I remember telling you I was going to buy some philo on this podcast a couple of weeks ago. That was your free tip for me, and I did that, and it's up 20% as this copper has come up in the past couple of weeks. I don't think that's a long-term thing. I'll probably bail out of that position, take my 20% in 2 weeks, and be happy. You never go broke taking a profit. And so there's things you can do if you're willing to be more short-term minded. But for the long-term minded investor, I was writing today, go back to bed is what I said.
The same philo that just reported 1,132 meters of 1.11% copper equivalent. That philo? Good gracious. And I'm telling everybody, here's your free tip of the day, other than you should still be buying Patriot battery metals. Hannon Metals this time next year, we're going to be having similar discussions. That's my gut feeling, and I'm not just saying it to say it. I'm telling you because I will be front running all of that and buying the heck out of it here over the next 6 months and establishing a very, very robust position, because I think we're gonna have a lot of fun with that one next year. So everybody's yawning right now. It's 25-30 cents. They just consummated a deal with Tech, where Tech clearly sees the potential. They came in and took, some 9% of the company. And it wouldn't surprise me to see them joint venture individual porphyries, right? They've discovered 7 or 8 porphyry centers now just on one project, and they control an entire basin. So short-term copper might pull back. Mid to long-term, copper's absolutely going to rip. I'll be bored for a year with Hannon if that's how long these drilling permit takes. As long as I can make my, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000% that I think I'm going to make, perfectly fine adding on any weakness with Hannon Metals.
Well, Tech likes what they see for sure, and not just Tech, but Jogmec as well, which you well know is, the Japanese arm, mining, oil and gas and mining arm. And there was a conference in Peru this week I was reading where they're starting to whisper sweet nothings into the miners' ears, whereas it's been a tough environment in Peru. Like you just said, it takes a year to get a permit sometimes. They were talking about, easing the way permitting gets done and not increasing taxes. And so I know there was a lot of fears in Peru, but they're at least saying the right things now, which helps on the macro side of things for sure.
It sure beats what they were saying before, right? We talk gold. We didn't talk silver. I always call silver, gold's bipolar mistress or gold's bipolar cousin, right? And we saw it this week. I mean, Gold was up 1% or 2%. Silver surged something like 12% over a couple of days. Is it going to go back to trade like the industrial metal that it is, or do you think it keeps its precious metals luster that it's been demonstrating here recently?
I think silver's an industrial metal.
Me too.
If you make me bet, I bet that it goes to 15 before you see 30.
The silver bugs are going to love you, Nick. Hashtag silver squeeze. Let's talk oil. OPEC managed to piss off Joe Biden and, throw a middle finger at everybody by cutting oil production by 2 million barrels per day to make oil more expensive. This right before the midterm elections. And this right as Joe is out there, making mistakes left and right, though. He did something today that I really like, and we'll talk about that. But oil production to be cut by 2 million barrels per day. You have been spot on in your oil price analysis from a year and a half ago up until this very day. What do you see for oil, Mr. Hodge?
I think priced in. Last week I was telling you it was going to be between 60 and 80. And I was sort of wondering why it's been going up for the past, call it, week or so. It's trading at, let me move my mouse, $88 today. And I think that's about all you're going to get from this announcement, right? They cut by $2 million a day. We'll release another 10 million barrels from the reserve, Biden said. And you just don't have the backdrop there from a demand perspective, given that basically the entire world is in a recession. So bit of politics going on, I would say there, more so than actual supply-demand fundamentals driving OPEC. It's interesting to see our staunch ally, Saudi Arabia, helping out Russia a bit. Our
staunch ally that we were just over there licking boots to, that staunch ally?
Yeah, the one that cuts up journalists, the one that puts the bombers on the plane, yeah.
Yeah, American citizen journalist, by the way. He had dual citizenship, y'all, in the Saudi embassy. Don't forget that, everybody. The SEC won't let Kim be. Out of all of the enforcement action that the SEC can take.
She's the new Martha Stewart.
She's the new Martha Stewart, man. Y'all better leave Kim's pretty ass alone, man. That's one successful, intelligent, beautiful woman. She tweeted about a crypto thing. I mean, if Kim's in trouble and had to pay $1.4 million, they're just cherry picking for headlines at this point. Talk about clout chasing. And again, I'm actually a big Law and Order guy. I just want you to apply it equally, right? It's
sure.
Like I hate when people come out and it's Law and Order on one thing, and then I don't see that because I don't agree with that. So don't apply Law and Order over here. Leave Kim alone. Any thoughts on that?
Well, first, some of these shitcoins were as fake as her ass. And you're starting to see that now. I've had Miss Kardashian on a couple of slides and presentations that I've given talking about some of the fakeness.
And look good in every single one of those slides. Every single one of those slides, you look great, Kim, baby. Don't worry about Nick.
my favorite are the pictures of her sisters from like 5-10 years ago and today, right? All natural. And what you say is true. I mean, all kinds of celebrities, athletes, etc., were involved in crypto schemes that people lost money in. I mean, lots of people lost money in crypto this year, but even the likes of Elon Musk was using Twitter and his following to pump up Shiba Inu coins last year. And we haven't seen any action taken against him, for example. And so that's a total headline grabber,
Yep.
From a much bigger picture. There's a lot going on in the crypto space, and some of the bigger failures are being cracked down on. Do Kwon of Terra Luna infamy has a global red alert on him from Interpol, right? Like arrest on site. And so they're trying to get some of these people, but at the same time, crypto, despite Bitcoin being down some, 60% from its highs, if not a bit more, continues to make inroads as it relates to the larger global financial picture. Excuse me for 1 second. Gosh, what was sticking out in my head? So we have Chris Curl, who feeds me a lot of this stuff and whose articles I read. But I also try to read, at least the big headlines about crypto every week. And, you've had some managing director at Goldman Sachs leave to go over to Coinbase to, foster a derivatives market there. So, making inroads into using crypto to trade derivatives. And then the real big one, which was sort of overlooked, is that the SWIFT banking system, which a lot of people didn't know until earlier this year when we started putting sanctions on Russia, right? And we banned them from using the SWIFT banking system. You and I know it because we send wires, international wires, to buy shares from foreign companies. And so when you do that, you got to use the SWIFT banking system. And it takes a long time. I've had wires lost. I don't know if you've had wires lost.
I have.
Right. And it's a tedious process. And sometimes it has to go through intermediary banks, and it takes multiple days for the funds to get there and settle. Well, SWIFT is now adopting something called Chainlink, which is a blockchain built on top of Ethereum. And basically they're saying, we know we're dinosaurs and we know we need to use this whole crypto ecosystem to improve the transfer of money globally. And you had a MasterCard CEO come out and sort of say the same thing. And so while we are in a crypto winter and while Bitcoin prices remain subdued, they aren't going away as it relates to, their place in the global financial system. DeFi, as it were, versus TradFi, which is, traditional finance. And so don't forget about crypto is what I would say, despite all the, superfluous headlines that you see from the Kardashian corners of the world.
There's a great tweet this week that said people who've been investigated by the SEC: Martha Stewart, a cook, as you mentioned, a deli store in New Jersey, at Elon Musk, a Twitter shitposter, and Kim Kardashian, a fashion influencer. People who haven't been investigated by the SEC. Almost every politician and executive in power. Well done. Well done. I tell you who is being investigated finally, and we've talked about this. It looks like Hunter Biden wasn't just cracking hookers. I think he's going to get himself grounded here soon in a very permanent way. Anytime I see a story leak that federal agents are investigating the president's son and that they believe they've collected sufficient evidence to charge him with tax crimes and gun purchase crimes, I don't believe in coincidences when there's leaks like that to the media. I think Hunter will be posting bail soon, and that'll be interesting court disclosure and deposition, to say the least.
I thought nobody fucks with a Biden. Isn't that what the president said this week in a hot mic?
That's exactly what he said in a hot mic.
It's interesting to me that the two most recent first families both have immediate family members under federal investigation.
Again, this is not a coincidence, guys.
Right. It's not like it's a fourth turning or a major political inflection point in the course of the history of the United States or anything.
They all think they can get away with it. Again, for those of you upset about my Democrat rants or my Republican rants, this is the government that the founders warned of. We're living under that government right now. They both think they can get away with it and nothing will ever happen to them. And look, I don't know if he's guilty or not. I don't know if Trump is guilty or not, although he's being accused of taking classified files, not returning them. And then they found classified files, so it looks like he's guilty. I don't know. I'm not an attorney general, and I'm not an attorney, and I'm no legal scholar, but both sides think they can get away with it and there will be no repercussions. It'll be really interesting to see what comes of Hunter Biden and his, apparently criminal ways. It wasn't all partying, right? Up until now, I've said, well, hey, if he wants to pay for hookers and smoke crack and the hookers are there consensually and accepting the money and having a great time and he's not abusing of anyone other than himself, then to each their own, right? This looks like a little bit different tone there. So we'll see what plays out.
Maybe after marijuana, Biden's going to pardon hookers and crack convictions. We'll see how it goes.
Definitely going to get into Biden doing a very good thing. Go Joe, right? Yeah.
Before we do, it's this Italian election has been making the news, and you wonder why people like that get elected. The media is calling this woman, her name is Giorgia, Meloni? Yeah, a far right fascist politician. But in the speeches that I've heard, she's more a populist than a fascist, speaking right to the people about basically exactly what you just said. Like, these entrenched bankers and politicians think they own you and are a different class, etc. I haven't dived too deep into any of the racial sentiments. I know that there's a lot of foreigners that are going into Italy, etc. But clearly, she's resonating just as Trump resonated, in 2016 with people for being an outsider. I would say that Trump's an insider at this point, but it's no wonder that people like that get elected, right? And are able to resonate with people, and it's easier in Italy because there's so many political parties, right? People have more choice. Here in the United States, we know the two parties collude to get the candidates who they want and keep others off the stage, and so it's global. People are pissed off, especially in Europe, which we know is already in a recession that the media actually recognizes, whereas here we're still approaching a recession or wondering if we're going to go into a recession.
Politicians were spicy and sassy this week. We had Joe at the hot mic. Did you see Elon and the Ukrainian diplomat and their little Twitter spat?
No, I didn't. Well, I saw he was saying something, but I didn't quite. He was even getting into it with Gary Kasparov, the chess guy. There's a whole chess thing going on. We'll have to spend a whole podcast.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, let's do that one next week or the week after. And on that note, everyone, we will be at the New Orleans Investment Conference next week. So next week being this week. So there may be a lapse in your next Bizarro World episode. We will make it up to you with some live footage from New Orleans or figure out a nice little something in its stead. So I just wanted to get that out there in case next Monday, Tuesday after this podcast, you're wondering where the heck are Nick and Gerardo and their rants and the raves and all the other stuff. But so anyhow, back to Elon. So he tweeted, he posted a Twitter poll, right? Which is hilarious because now he's back trying to buy Twitter if he's able to secure the financing and all of that. But he said, he's got a potential solution to end this 7-month conflict. And basically it was 3 parts: that a Ukrainian territory, which Russia annexed by force in 2014, be permanently given to Russia and guaranteed a permanent water supply. That was step 1 for Elon. Step 2 was that the 4 regions of eastern Ukraine where Russia held referendums last month before illegally annexing the land to be put to the new referendums, this time organized by the United Nations. That was his step 2. And then step 3 for him was that Ukraine should be forced to remain neutral, accomplishing the long-term Kremlin goal of barring Ukraine from joining the NATO defensive alliance. And in response to that, the Ukrainian diplomat replied in a tweet, of course, "Fuck off" is my very diplomatic reply to you. So between that and Joe's hot mic, I'm like, man, they're spicy out there this week, Nick. They're on edge.
It's the curse words are flying around. It reminds me, that we have bad language on this podcast sometimes. But, it's par for the course for the world. You got the president dropping F-bombs on hot mics, man. I mean, that's just how it is. I think the curse words show passion and sincerity, and we're past the Puritan days of needling dresses.
Look, I grew up on George Carlin and Richard Pryor, everybody, so I don't know what to tell you. It's going to be what it's going to be. In the words of Dave Chappelle, you're watching me. I'm not in your house watching you. I'm not bringing this to your place of employment or to your home. All you have to do is turn us off, baby. You don't got to listen. It's I get into it on Twitter with people sometimes. They go, I'll interview someone or I'll post a comment on a stock I like, and you'll get some troll or some bot just trolling the stock, and like, it's easy, just don't buy it. You don't gotta buy it. I'm not jacking your bank account and forcing you to buy shares in this thing. I'm just telling you what I think, right? And so, no, definitely interesting times. I'll tell you what was interesting about the Elon stat though with the Ukrainian diplomat is the fact that he's actually used, and the Ukraine has used that Starlink satellite communication system to bypass a lot of these internet outages that have been caused there. And so he's kind of provided a little bit of a lifeline in that sense, right? Without having to. I mean, while everybody else is sending weapons, including us here in the U.S., obviously, and aid to buy more weapon systems, he's actually taking the route where it's like, I just want people to be able to communicate and find an outcome. So I thought it was heavy-handed. I could care less either way. I don't know either one of those two gentlemen, but I thought it was a heavy-handed response given that they've been allies, at least on the Starlink satellite communication front.
I have to tell you, I finally got the Starlink last week in my house. We've had some slow internet for 5 years, and because we had to have Dish because we can't get no cable or Comcast or Verizon where we live, and some people have line of sight, but we have so many tall trees that you can't get line of sight internet, and so I mean it's been tough for us to watch Netflix or on demand shows, or certainly not being I wouldn't have been able to record this podcast from the house or upload big files or anything like that, and it's been a game changer, man. For the past week, we've had the Starlink on the roof, and oh man, no buffering, Netflix on demand, all good. So kudos to Elon Musk for that. He's definitely done some big things.
I love it. Go Elon. Appreciate you. Good luck with the Twitter thing. If we talk about the Twitter thing, we got to talk about the Trumpster. Elon's bringing him back if he buys Twitter. I mean,
wow, it's good for ratings, good for advertising, sure.
Yeah, 70-something million followers.
And good for free speech, I suppose, yeah.
Sure. Obviously, I've disagreed on many policy positions, as I disagree with many policy positions of a lot of politicians of all ilk, right? But you can't deny the guy's entertaining. I mean, you got to give him that much.
We would stop having to see the screenshots from Truth Social or whatever the other thing is called, and he'd be able just to get back on there. It was honestly more fun when Trump was on the Twitter.
It was more entertaining for sure. Yeah. Where are the Blue Lives Matter people?
Oh gosh, I don't know why you're asking.
Well, there was a police officer that was killed earlier this year, and I didn't see much about it. Story came out, and then I dug a little more. I'm like, oh, so there was an officer.
This is LA. Yeah.
Yeah, so this officer died during a training exercise earlier this year. And the officer, the training exercise was a simulation of being beat by a mob. Except that the other 4 officers that beat him in the simulated exercise really beat him to death. And then we just found out that the officers were under investigation. This officer was actually investigating them for a claim that they gang raped somebody. And so again, when I talked earlier about how selective certain parties and certain movements are about their outrage, if this had been an immigrant that had killed this officer, it would have been all over the media, especially the right-wing media. There would have been outrage, and it would have been Biden's fault. It would have been blood on his hands, and it's his weak border policies, despite the fact that he's arrested more illegal immigrants than I think any other president in the first couple of years of his presidency. And Obama did damn good at that as well. But anyhow, I digress. But again, the fact that this happens and there's not outrage over it, I don't know. Seems kind of odd. Although it's not surprising, it is odd to me.
Yeah, well, it was just a couple of weeks ago we were, recanting the Baltimore gun trace task force and talking about the show that's been made about that. And I was telling you about Detective Sean Suiter. I think I said his name wrong on the podcast, but his name was Sean Suiter. And
I say name wrongs all the time. It's okay.
I know. So I was rereading the story, and he was basically shot in the head in a park the day before he was set to testify against the gun trace task force, right? And so, that one got swept under the rug. They never found the killer and just attributed it to gang violence, right? Surprise, surprise. And here, same thing. This guy, as you said, he had filed a report for this young lady who filed a rape case saying that, she was raped by 4 guys, and they were all LAPD. And then as this guy looks to leave the force, he was looking to leave the force, it sounded like from the article that I read, and winds up, dead on, like you said, a mob simulation. But the guy had lacerations to his kidney. He was clearly pounded, man.
He had 3 broken ribs, a lacerated liver, head injuries, and a broken neck.
Right. And yeah, so his mom is filing a wrongful death case. So we'll see. But, more of those bad apples, I suppose.
And here's the part that does upset me. We talk about fourth turnings here often and how, we got to get these institutions, burn them all to the ground and rebuild them, right? And in this case, the LAPD Board of Police Commissioners ruled that he sustained his injuries during efforts to save his life. Come on, man. Like, I'll leave it alone. I'll leave it alone. It's the corruption is just insane. Again, this is what they do to a fellow officer. Can you imagine what they're doing to poor whites or poor blacks or poor Mexicans or illegal immigrants or women that don't speak English and have no money?
Well, your first question is actually the answer is, where are these blue line people? They are the blue line. They're upholding the blue line. I mean, he was crossing his fellow officers. He was crossing the blue line.
Yeah.
You don't do that, right?
Unless you want to die, apparently. All right, let's get to Joe. Let's get to a politician doing something good. Out of nowhere, right before the midterms, right? He's decided to pardon everybody that was convicted of weed possession under federal law. So that totals to about 6,500 people. I read a funny tweet earlier saying that he probably already forgot that most of those people were convicted under laws that he helped draft. And Kamala, certainly his vice president, I've been very critical of her and her involvement in excessive sentencing of particularly low income, all low income people, but it's skewed heavily towards black and brown people, right? So again, the cynical me says it's all political and it's another, plot to secure votes ahead of a midterm election that looks tough for them at best. And by them, I mean the Democrats. But again, I applaud the move. I think it's long overdue. I think marijuana still being a Schedule I substance is insane in 2022. And I hope this leads to a shift in how federal authorities view marijuana. As it relates to the markets, I know you were beating yourself up a little bit. I don't know if you care to share, but this did have an effect in the markets immediately after the tweet went out. And do you want to share your story, Nick?
Yeah, well, I think as recently as last week or the week before, I was mentioning the MSOS cannabis sector ETF. That's the U.S. Companies, the multi-state operators. That's why it's MSOS, the multi-state operator cannabis ETF. But, it's been bottoming, right? It was, I had a chart up here because I was looking at it. This is an ETF that, last fall was $33, almost $34. And has been plotting right along, $9 for the past couple of weeks. People were beginning to call bottom, and I've been paying more attention to it. And I had queued it up earlier this week, and as recently as today, I had it, queued up on my screen, thinking, this is getting pretty damn cheap here. I wonder, when the true bottom is going to be. And then all of a sudden, I saw the tweet, and I clicked back over to it, and the
Viagra chart.
Yeah, it was up almost 40% in the closing hours of the market. It closed up 34% on volume that was about 3 to 4 times the average. It normally does 2 or 3 million shares. It did over 12 million shares today. So, I guess good on Biden, right? I mean, this is an important step, right? I mean, it's the right thing to do. And you mentioned how it's classified. I mean, he had 3 points there. The first one was pardoning federal offenses. The second one was asking governors to pardon state marijuana offenses. And the third one was asking the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Attorney General to initiate the process of reviewing how marijuana is scheduled under federal law. So, again, jaded citizen here. I've been listening to Chuck Schumer for a couple of years saying that he was going to legalize marijuana, and it hasn't happened. And My gut reaction to this is that it's a midterm ploy, right?
Sure.
You've got some elections coming up here soon, and nothing has materially changed as far as banking or taxes or being able to use credit cards to buy marijuana or the actual scheduling of it. So we'll see. That's still going to take an act of Congress, but setting an ETF from below 9 to $13 in a day is certainly helpful in getting it off the bottom. We'll see if it truly does tick the bottom, but I think you'll have continued opportunities to buy as the luster of the tweets wear off, and as the bear market continues to play out. We haven't really talked about broader markets. So you mentioned October is a rough month for stocks. Earnings are already starting to come out, but you're going to get more and more earnings reports. You're going to get a CPI number next week. That's going to be continued high inflation, and you're going to get GDP later this month, which is, despite the Atlanta Fed saying that it's going to be over 2%, the number is going to be closer to 1%. And so a lot of headwinds still for the broader market that will likely overshadow the short-term euphoria and the cannabis stocks. And hopefully I'm not just telling myself that to make me feel better for not buying it.
You said ETF, and it made me think of, did you see the inverse Jim Cramer ETF that somebody filed? They say Jim Cramer is a contrarian indicator because he's had a rough go of it with some of his picks here recently. So somebody decided to file supposedly an inverse Jim Cramer ETF. And then somebody tweeted, what happens if Jim Cramer recommends it? And that provided a great laugh. And so I just wanted to share, because laughing is good for the soul, everybody. And there's enough crazy stuff going on out there to where we could all use a good excuse to laugh.
I wonder what the ticker would be. It would be like MIJ, like Jim backwards.
You gotta love the creativity sometimes. Nick, what are you watching for in the markets this week? I started with what I'm watching. I'm watching for Patriot battery metals to close that financing if it hasn't happened by the time you read or see this. And I'm watching for those assay results because I think finally we're going to start seeing the potential scale of this thing. Anybody that thought this was 2.1 kilometers, you have another thing coming. This is going to get really big, really quick, and it's going to be a lot of fun between now and year end, y'all.
I mean, we covered it already. I'm looking to see the dollar, resume its upward trend.
Yeah.
Looking to reshort this market as it continues to deflate. Looking to see how the sentiment is with the retail crowd at the New Orleans conference. We were just at Beaver Creek, but that's sort of an institutional conference, and so it'll be interesting to see how these retail investors are seeing things at the New Orleans show and to talk to the companies there. So not a lot really to say. Like I said, I was writing today that it's you could go back to bed. I think you've got a continued couple of quarters of more of the same here, and so. That's about it for me. We didn't really mention nuclear. So you mentioned that they've been relatively subdued, and you've got this continued nuclear threat, which we first started talking about maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago here on the podcast. There was a supposed convoy or a train carrying, Russian nuclear assets. And the thinking is that, they could potentially be deployed. That's sort of the overhang, as I see it, for the uranium sector, right? I mean, you get Putin starting to fire even small-scale nukes. That's going to take the wind out of the sales of the uranium market really quick, despite the fundamentals, as you said, talking to Amir, being, as bullish as they ever were. And so closely keeping an eye on that, because those whispers just haven't gone away.
They're getting louder.
Louder,
yeah. They're getting louder. It's Zelensky now that is advocating for being able to preemptively strike Russia using nuclear weapons, small nuclear weapons. So that's getting into really dangerous territory. Don't like it at all. Yeah, scary stuff, folks. I obviously hoping for the best on all fronts on that front. Anytime I see global debt levels where they're at, and I see bond markets teetering on the edge, and I see institutions looking like they're going to implode, high Credit Suisse, And then I see the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, right? The invasion, and then the whispers grow into conversations about preemptive nuclear strikes. It's an easy excuse to drop a nuke on somebody and say that that's why the whole financial system needs to be restructured, when in fact, that's not the reason why it's going to get restructured. It's going to get restructured because it's designed to implode, and it's designed to transfer wealth from the very, very, very poor to the very, very, very rich, baby. That's the design of it. That's what we've been doing for the past 30, 40 years. And so, you know, I see this as a real easy thing, as cynical as it sounds, for governments around the world to get behind, because man, would that provide a good distraction. Freudian slip.
Sure. Well, both.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but certainly would be a good excuse to do some of the things that need to be done. Did your Cubs make the playoffs? I haven't been following.
This was not that year.
No.
This was not that year. We were, it was a tough year for us, but we put, I think we're putting together a team that's going to contend next year. I think we'll bring in some additional pieces. There were some young stars that really, really emerged this year into all-stars and potential future all-stars that I think we have a good base now. And I just think we need another pitcher or two and another batter or two. And luckily we have the capital as a team to go out and spend that money. And the front office seems willing to spend that money. So I'm looking forward to a very, very loud 2023 from my Cubs. But yeah, the season just ended, and I supported the team since 1984 when I first moved to Chicago. So a lot more losing seasons than winning seasons, that's for sure. And it should be a fun off season.
Baseball playoffs are always fun to watch. I'm not the most diehard fan, and I don't follow day to day, but I saw the Orioles, which used to be my team, had their first winning season since 2016. And here, where I get most of the baseball news, the Mariners, because they're the Washington team, made the playoffs for the first time since 2001. So I guess good to see some new blood in there. Absolutely.
And just for some context on those credit sweeps, credit default swaps, back in mid 2021, you could buy one of those for $50, right? Right now, it's at almost $400. It's at $378. And in the past week, it's gone from the 200 level to nearly the 400 level. It's a 100% increase in risk, according to the people that are buying these things. So just putting that out there. That's all I got, Nick. Anything else on your mind?
No, that's it.
I love it. I'm Gerardo Del Real, along with Mr. Nick Hodge. This was Therapy Session, otherwise known as Bizarro World number 189. Go be kind to each other out there, everyone. Have a fun week. Be safe. Enjoy your October. Nick, say something nice to the people.
See you next week from New Orleans.
Click, like, subscribe, comment. We don't care. It doesn't matter. Hopefully we see you all next week. Be safe out there, y'all.
Hey there, you independent-minded investor. If you like this video, make sure to tell us so by clicking the like button below. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another one. And share it with everyone you know on social media. You can also click the link in the description below to check out more information-packed videos just like this one. Thanks for watching.